I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this is actually the most excited I've been to record a video in a while because it was such an interesting idea and concept that kind of popped into my mind. Now, this isn't a fully original idea, and this isn't even an original idea within the niche that I'm making this video on. So for years, you know, I'm sure even back in the day when you were younger, you've probably heard people be like, hey, you're stuck on a desert island, what is the one food, one movie, one whatever that you're gonna take with you? And there was even a video, as I had mentioned before, made by Scott the Woz like 5-6 years ago, something like that, that I watched years ago, and it just sort of popped in my mind this morning. I was like, hey, that's actually a really cool concept. So rather than just like, you know, full on stealing the idea, you know, I'm not gonna like just take his idea and not credit him for it. This video was inspired by that Scott the Woz video. However, this is obviously me putting my own spin on it, and rather than doing what he did in that video where he just kind of focused on games more or less, I wanted to focus on the consoles, and by the end of this, I want to have like, okay, so here's how we're gonna do it first. First, we're gonna break it down to each of the platform holders. If I had to choose one console from each, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, which console am I gonna choose to take with me to that desert island? And then I'm gonna choose like, oh, I don't know, maybe 5 games per console, but then by the end, I'm really gonna challenge myself and just break it down to that one console with that selection of 5 games. And something is telling me that this is going to be pretty interesting. So, first things first, I'm going to need to do what I've done many times on this channel and go steal some printer paper from my mother. If you're watching this, I'm sorry, I'll cash app you like 25 cents for the paper. I do this all the time. I'm really sorry. Paper acquired. Now I need to get a clipboard. Well, after grabbing the clipboard, I just realized that I actually didn't need this paper because we did the whole DS versus PSP video a couple weeks ago, and I literally could have just, you know, flipped it, but I will flip this over for now. I'll just save this paper for next time so then I can save 25 cents. Because I really do feel, I steal paper all the time. I honestly don't even know who's like gonna win this. I don't know what consoles I'm gonna choose. This is one of those things where I just wanted to turn the camera on and see what my brain would come up with. So like, I kind of have a general idea of some things I might pick, but I don't know, man. Alright, so I have them all written down here. Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo. So I guess first things first, we'll start off with Xbox. And again, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through all the Xbox consoles, choose a specific console, and then come up with 5 games for that console. And then I'm gonna do the same thing for PlayStation and Nintendo. And this is really difficult because there's a lot of things to, you know, think about when it comes to choosing a console nowadays. Because back in the day, it would have just been like, alright, let's think about the consoles, their libraries, and then go from there. But nowadays, like Nintendo, you have like Nintendo Switch Online, which is like, okay, like at that point, why would you not choose the Nintendo Switch? Because you have the Nintendo Switch library, NES games, SNES games, Sega Genesis, N64, like the list just goes on and on. Game Boy, Game Boy Advance. So like, do we count Switch Online? But then again, if I'm on a desert island, are they gonna have internet? And after 7 days, I won't even be able to play those games. So I don't know. We'll get to that when we get to Nintendo. We'll decide what counts and what doesn't count. I think what I'm going to do just to keep this interesting is I'm going to limit it to only that console's library. So if I choose Xbox One, I couldn't choose any 360 games even though the Xbox One is backwards compatible, especially considering that the Xbox One does rely on like the internet side of things to actually make that backwards compatibility possible, which now that I'm thinking of it, yeah, this is making things really crazy. So, Xbox. So first things first, we have the original Xbox. Now don't worry, because I know when we get to like PlayStation, there's going to be like, you know, 5 PlayStations to go through. I'm not going to do like a full retrospective on every single console, but I at least want to briefly at least touch on their library. So for the original Xbox, man, you have things like the original Halo, Halo 2, you have Fable, oh my gosh, man, now that I'm thinking, oh, dude, I don't even know where I'm gonna go with this. Time Splitters 2, Future Perfect, Crash Twinsanity, Crash Wrath of Cortex, I don't care what anyone says, I love Wrath of Cortex. Then you have a bunch of obscure 3D platforms that I've always loved on the platform. You have things like Voodoo Vince, and then you have other games that were exclusive to it, like Jade Empire, oh, and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, some of the best RPGs ever created, and then a bunch of the classic LEGO games, of course, like LEGO Star Wars 1 and 2, and okay, and then we move up to the Xbox 360. I'm trying to be careful here. I don't want to linger on just one platform for too long, so we have a lot of platforms to get through. But then the Xbox 360, immediately the first games that come to my mind: MW2, Halo 3, Black Ops 2, Minecraft, GTA 4, GTA 5, the Mass Effect trilogy, Fables 2 and 3, all of the LEGO games. I'm a huge LEGO fan, by the way. Like, when I buy a console, one of the first games that I buy is always going to be a Call of Duty, a GTA if it's available, and then a LEGO game. Not to mention the fact that the Xbox 360 has a ton of remasters from, you know, the generation before, whether that be Resident Evil 4, which, surprisingly, Resident Evil 4 never made its way to the original Xbox. It was on GameCube and was supposed to be, you know, exclusive to GameCube, but now it's been released on, like, everything under the sun, including the Brazilian Zeebo, and, you know, like, iOS devices back in the day. Like, it's literally been on everything with the various versions of the game made, but somehow it never made its way to the original Xbox. In fact, the original Xbox got no Resident Evil games at all. But, again, yeah, you have a lot of those remasters from the generation before, and then you also have some games that were kind of like cross-platform sort of remasters at the time. Like, Battlefield 2 came out shortly after the Xbox and PS2 version was basically like a remaster of sorts of that original version. And then you had straight-up backwards compatibility on the Xbox 360, but again, I don't know if I necessarily want to count that, even though it is a feature of the system, so we'll keep the libraries individual. But, again, there were so many amazing games released for the Xbox 360. Not to mention the fact that since Microsoft had Rare at that point, you know, there was like sort of like remaster remakes of like Perfect Dark and Banjo-Kazooie, which are absolutely legendary games. So, oh man, I don't know, that Xbox 360, I mean, you guys know me, right? Like, the first console generation that I mainly grew up during as a young child was the PS2. And the 360 was the one that I had mainly during, like, my, going into the teenage years, like, before I became a teenager, and then through my teenage years for a bit, up until the Xbox One released. You know, that was, like, those were the years with the 360 where I was starting to become a bit more social, starting to, you know, get more friends, whereas during the PS2 generation, that was just when I was, like, a young child, you know what I mean? So, the Xbox 360, there was a lot of, I don't have a lot of that early nostalgia for the 360 like I do for the PS2, but I still have the formative years nostalgia, if you understand what I'm trying to say. You know, if you grew up during that era, you know exactly what I mean. And just, you know, having friends and being online and, you know, just playing online at that time was completely different to how it was before or after that. It was truly a unique and just a special time to be alive, whether you had a 360 or a PS3. And then moving up to the Xbox One, I mean, again, there's so many amazing games on that platform, but if I'm gonna be honest, like, you know, as much, don't get me, I love the Xbox One. Played the Xbox One a ton during its heyday, and to this day, I'm still constantly going back to the Xbox One. Sure, you can just play all the Xbox One games on Series X, but let's be honest, the Series X doesn't have the most storage in the world, and even if you hook up a hard drive, you know, again, for a guy like me where I have Game Pass and I like having hundreds of games downloaded on my hard drive, you know, it helps to have both an Xbox One and the new ones plugged in, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, still, and there's so many amazing games that were released during that generation. We have games like Control or like Quantum Break, which is honestly one of my favorite Xbox One exclusives. Like, that game is super underrated. And then you had games that were like sort of kind of exclusive to the platform for a bit, but obviously aren't exclusive to it now, like Super Lucky's Tale, for example, and then they had New Super Lucky's Tale, which was sort of like a remake of Super Lucky's Tale, but that game was really cool, really charming, really fun 3D platformer. And then you had games like Sunset Overdrive that launched with the system, which was made by Insomniac, believe it or not. Yes, the same Insomniac that makes the Spider-Man games for PlayStation and makes a bunch of other, like, PlayStation first-party IPs, so, you know, that's a bit of an interesting history there. And then you have games like Rise, Son of Rome, which is another one that I feel like is really underrated. And then you have all the great Forza games that came out during that generation, like Forza Horizon 2, which also came out on 360, but then, like, Horizon 3 and 4, and then 5 was cross-gen with Series X, and Halo 5, I don't care what anybody says, I really enjoyed Halo 5. Gears 4 and 5, also a lot of fun with, especially Gears 5. Like, I played that one a ton when it released, and I still go back to that one and play it consistently, especially since it's the latest Gears game. And then we move up to the Series X, and this is where things get interesting, because a lot of the games that I would point out and be like, oh yeah, absolute masterpiece, a lot of them, not all of them, are available either on other platforms like PS5 or this, that, or the other. It's just that the Series X hasn't had a ton of exclusive games yet. It has had some amazing exclusive games, don't get me wrong. Halo Infinite, I love the campaign and the multiplayer in that game. I had a lot of fun with it. Hellblade 2, absolute masterpiece of a game. Like, there has been a lot of amazing, you know, first-party exclusives for Xbox. I mean, it's debatable as if it really is first-party, since it's just more or less companies that they acquire. Like, you know, Starfield, for example. I love Starfield. I thought that game got dunked on way too much. I really enjoyed my time with that game. But, you know, again, that's exclusive to the platform. Indiana Jones coming up will be a timed exclusive. So, you know, the exclusives are definitely picking up here. So, again, though, it's just one of those things where it's like, as much as I love the Series X, you know, when it does come to those exclusives and such, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a part of it's definitely nostalgia, but it's just, I don't know, man. There's something about that Xbox 360 library. I think that's the one that I'm going to go with here, is the Xbox 360 out of all the Xbox platforms. If I was stranded on a desert island, that's probably the one that I take. So you got to remember, even though the Series X can play, you know, Xbox One, 360, and even some original Xbox games, those do require an internet connection because it has to call to the server to download those things, and we're trying to stay within the lane of only that console's specific library. So now that we have chosen the Xbox 360, I need to come up with 5 games, and if I'm gonna choose 5 games, we're gonna go BO2 right off the rip, because that's my all-time favorite Call of Duty, so I'll probably have that. I want to say GTA, but I'm gonna wait on that because, man, it depends how things shake out here with PlayStation. Okay, we're gonna come up with a bit of a maybe pile, right? So for the maybe pile, we'll put down like GTA 4 or 5. We'll go GTA 5 just because as much as I love GTA 4, I feel like there's more room for utter chaos and replayability within GTA 5 just because of the customization features, even in the single player there. I'm also going to mark down Minecraft just because that's another safe bet, obviously. Towards the top here, I guess I'd probably put in like Halo 3? Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, that's really tough. Do I want 3 or Reach? Because I played both of them. I know that's probably going to be controversial for me to say because a lot of people are probably like, oh, 3, no, but I played a lot of both Reach and 3, and like, Reach, I just there's something I've always loved and respected about that game just because it's one of the few games where it wasn't scared to have a bitter, just downright depressing ending. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of games that have had endings like that, but there's something about Reach's ending where it just hits different every time you play it. And you also had like that fun, what's it called, like that wave-based mode in the game. I can't even think of what it's called for the life of me right now, but it's like Fire Team, Firefight, something like that, where it's like a PvE mode. If I'm gonna keep it real with y'all, I haven't played Halo Reach since like 2020, so it's been a good 4 or 5 years, something like that, since I played the game, so I'm kind of blanking here. But yeah, you know, like, I've played a ton of Reach back in the day, and when I think of Xbox 360, that's just one of those classic games where it's like, even though I already have a first-person shooter here with BO2, I love Reach, man. That's a great Halo game. Next up, I definitely want, I think I'd want a racing game. Then again, if GTA is going to be in this pile, which you know what, we're just going to take it out of the maybe pile. We're going to put GTA on here. Okay, so forget the racing game thing. I was going to say maybe like Split Second, because that's one of my favorite racing games there on the Xbox 360. But now, okay, so now where do we go from here? Just looking at my 360 collection, there's a lot of obvious choices I could make here, like, there's some games like Borderlands that I would really want to put on there, or like games like Skyrim, because I mean that one's like endlessly replayable as well. Like, I'm trying to think, I want a mix of games that are like story-based but also endlessly replayable, because if you're stuck with it on a desert island, then like, you know, you wanted to at least have a good bit of replayability there. You know what? My mind is decided. We're gonna put Minecraft on here. And then the last one, which is probably going to be really unexpected, Plants vs. Zombies. And I'm not even kidding. Now, this is really hard for me because I could either choose Plants vs. Zombies or Zuma is also available on Xbox 360. And if y'all don't know what Zuma is, it's basically this game where you play as like this frog and you have these colored balls in your mouth. Get your mind out the gutter. And you have to align the balls with the other balls. It's not like Peggle, but it's like the closest thing I guess you could compare it to, with like the whole balls and color thing. But Zuma is like, it's a really nostalgic one for me because that game came out in like the early 2000s. I remember playing it on PC back in the day, and there is a version available on Xbox, but between Zuma and Plants vs. Zombies, I feel like while Zuma is a fantastic game and I absolutely love it and it is endlessly replayable, you know, you go through the story and then you have like your high score mode trying to go for a high score, whereas with like Plants vs. Zombies, I feel like there might be more replayability to lean into there, because not only do you have the main adventure mode, which lasts for a bit longer than Zuma's, but also just all the different mini games. You can either, you know, play as the zombies or you can play as the plants. You have the bowling mini games, and it just goes on and on with all the different mini games and modes available. So just for the replayability factor, I think that's where I'm gonna put it. Xbox 360, Black Ops 2, Halo Reach, GTA 5, Minecraft, and Plants vs. Zombies. So that, honestly, I wasn't sure how I was gonna go, but I feel like that's a solid list for the Xbox 360. So now we're gonna move over to the PlayStation, and I'm gonna try to spend not as much time dilly-dallying here. I feel like in my heart, I already know which one I'm gonna choose, and that is the PS2, but we'll still run through it. So the first console that I remember playing on as a child was the Super Nintendo, but the one that I played after that was the PlayStation 1. So the SNES and the PS1 are two consoles that have a lot of just, you know, nostalgia deep in my heart, which is, the more that I say that now, the more interesting it's going to make things when we get to Nintendo's platform. So, oh man, I'm scared to even talk about that one, but we'll just run through it quick. For the PS1, you have so many classic games like Spyro and Resident Evil 2 and 3 and Crash. Oh Oh gosh, this is actually getting really difficult. Okay, so you have that. Then you have like the first and second Gran Turismo. Then you get to the PS2. You have Resident Evil 4, my favorite game of all time. You have a bunch of great 3D platformers like Crash to Insanity, Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. I know that's a bit more of like a niche one, but that game was always a lot of fun. Then you had amazing first-person shooters like Time Splitters. I know we talked about Time Splitters for the original Xbox, but man, I feel like Time Splitters is gonna make the list here. You had Call of Duty games on the PlayStation. You had games like Burnout and Burnout Dominator, which Dominator came out a little bit later. I think it was even after like the PS3 release, but that game was super underrated. Love Burnout Dominator. You had some of the best licensed tie-in games of all time, like Battle for Bikini Bottom and the SpongeBob movie game, Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, but Star Wars Battlefront 2, the original one. Oh my goodness. Okay, so, man, okay, then we go to the PS3, then you have the ones where it's like, you know, Black Ops 2 and all the amazing exclusives like Starhawk, Warhawk, Resistance, Killzone 2 and 3, The Last of Us, again, the list goes on and on with the amazing exclusives, God of War 3, the Sly Cooper games had like remasters there, but... well, no, we also did have an original game there with Thieves in Time. The original trilogy was only on the PS2, but it did get an HD collection on PS3. But again, I want to kind of stick to just what that platform brought to the table. And man, going back to the PS2, yeah, you had games like Jak and Daxter and all those, like there's so many amazing games on the PlayStation 2 there. That's where Killzone began. And then going back to the PS3, yeah, there's just so many amazing games that were released during that time. Moving up to the PS4, obviously we all know that's where Sony really went in on the exclusives. You had games like the Order 1886, which I've always loved, God of War 2018, Spider-Man 2018, The Last of Us 2, Days Gone, all of the amazing Call of Duty games that released during that time, like underrated ones such as Infinite Warfare, or some that are regarded as some of the best of all time, like Black Ops 3 with the sheer amount of zombies content on offer there. And oh man, I don't know, this is tricky. See, and then we get to PS5, and obviously, you know, the PS5 is off to a great start. It has tons of exclusives there and this, that, and the other, but in my heart, you know, it's one of those things where as much as I love the PS3, the PS4, the PS5, I feel like I have my bases covered with the Xbox 360 in terms of like more modern-ish gaming, and you know, for some of those games like GTA 5 and Black Ops 2 that I'd already have there, I feel like that kind of covers my bases on, you know, some of the games that I'd be looking towards on like on some of the more modern consoles like a PS4, PS5, PS3, where like Black Ops 2, you know, that more aligns with like the PS3 thing, or GTA 5. Obviously that's also available like the PS4 or the PS5, where, you know, those are more like modern games, endlessly replayable. They have both in-depth story modes as well as just like fun sandboxes to mess around in. So I think what I want to do, just to kind of like, I don't know, have some more differentiation between between the platforms, is go to the one that's, I guess, the most unique here, at least compared to the Xbox 360 in terms of just, you know, the generational difference, as well as just what my heartstrings are being pulled towards. So again, as much love as I have for the PS3, PS4, PS5, and even the PS1, obviously a lot of that deep nostalgia there. I mean, you literally see the PS5 in the back. That's like one of my daily driver consoles that I play nonstop. The PS2, man, I mean that's another console where it's been in my life for, you know, as long as I can remember, and year after year, month after month, week after week, day after day, the PS2 is still one of my daily drivers as well. So I have a lot of memories there. There's a great library of games there, and it just, when it comes to any PlayStation console where it's like, okay, I have to choose just one, it would be the PlayStation 2. So this is where things get tricky. I think my list, I'm already trying to summarize here. So I already know one of the games on the list is going to be Resident Evil 4, just because that's my favorite video game of all time. So we're just going to PS2, RE4, and then I think the next game on my list is going to be Crash Twin Sanity, just because if you're choosing the PS2, you need some 3D platformers there. That's just part of what that generation was known for, was the amazing and just, you know, fun little quirky 3D platformers that sort of carried over from the PS1 generation. And again, Crash Twin Sanity, that is my favorite Crash Bandicoot game. So that's the one that I'm going to choose there. And then from there, oh man, I really don't know what to pick next. I think... man, see, you know, because over on the Xbox 360, I could have put Lego Batman just because, you know, that game technically came out during the 360 PS3 generation, but back in the day, I actually had the PS2 version first and played that the most at first, and that was how I 100%ed the game the first couple of times and put my first couple hundred hours into that game. So I think I would roll with the PS2 version of Lego Batman. So again, even though it's available on 360, and that would technically be the HD version, I mean, that list is already stacked with BO2, Halo Reach, GTA 5, Minecraft, and PvZ. And while I could maybe, if I had to switch out any game, maybe I could swap out Reach for Lego Batman. Again, the nostalgia's there for the PS2 version, so we'll just roll with that. I'm cool with that. And then outside of that, man, see, I want to put games on here like Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, or like Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy, because I put so much time into those games. But I don't know, man. What do I do next? I mean, GTA 3, GTA Vice City, those are great games. But I mean, again, if we're going to a desert island where I have these 3 consoles, I know by the end we're going to narrow it down to just one, but the general idea here is that I have one of each console just because as a gamer that's who I am. I need my Xbox, I need my PlayStation, I need my Nintendo, I need my Mario, I need my Halo, I need all the Sony IPs like God of War and Horizon and such. Like, I need all 3. I've never been one for the console wars. I love all of the consoles for their own reasons and their own IPs. So, Desert Island wise, I would need all 3. We will narrow it down in the end. It's going to be hard, but at this time, oh man, this is really difficult. What 2 games do I put last? Because again, I could put something like Burnout Dominator, which is one of my favorite racing games of all time, but we already have our bases covered with a game with racing elements with GTA 5, because you can do races within that game. So if I got desperate enough for a race, I could just dive in and do that there. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. I really want to include Lego Star Wars as well, which, oh man, this is difficult because now I'm kind of thinking I might, okay, so we have Lego Batman here, right? So if I'm going to choose one Lego game, I would probably have to choose, like, Lego Batman, just because that's my favorite Lego game, one of my top 5 favorite of all time. But then there's also Lego Star Wars 1 and 2, and then there's the Complete Saga, which the Complete Saga version, it wasn't available on PS2, even though the PS2 had Lego Star Wars 1 and 2. The Complete Saga was only on Wii, 360, PS3, and PC. So, no, see, okay, we already have Lego Batman here. We already have our Lego game covered. I'm just going to stop right there. I'm thinking for the other 2 games on the PS2 list, you know what? The Godfather, the game. That's what I'm going to do. That's a game that was also available on the 360, but again, we have our bases covered with like the open world type game with GTA 5 on the 360. But The Godfather, there was so much nostalgia there for me, and the nostalgia for that game that I have cannot be explained in words. I love The Godfather. It is technically like a licensed tie-in game, yet despite that, it totally stands on its own as just a masterpiece of a video game. Both that and its sequel that only released on PS3 and 360 and PC and all that, The Godfather 2, is also amazing. But for PS2 specifically, I'm gonna roll with The Godfather. Again, there is HD versions available, but the PS2 version is just the one that I played most back in the day. And then after that, this is where it gets tricky. So we have RE4, Crash Twinsanity, Lego Batman, and The Godfather. From there, I want to put Time Splitters on here so bad because I have a lot of nostalgia for that game, but there's also a lot of other games from that era that I really, really, really want to include on this list. Like, this is going to sound crazy, but I want to put WALL-E on here. I know out of the entire PS2 library, for some people, it would be like, WALL-E? The WALL-E tie-in game? Why? But it's just, again, I played that game a ton back in the day, and I have a lot of nostalgia for it. But we also kind of have our bases covered with the whole puzzle / 3D platformer type thing with Crash Twinsanity, so I guess I won't do that one, but oh my gosh, this is so difficult. And I want to put a racing game, but now we already have The Godfather here, which has like driving elements, but at the same time, it's so different. So do I put Burnout Dominator? Do I put Star Wars Battlefront? You know what? If I want an endlessly replayable game, okay, here's what I'm thinking. I wanted Lego Star Wars in here, but obviously I can't do Lego Star Wars because I already have my bases covered with Lego Batman. I could do Lego Star Wars, but again, only 5 games. Here's what I'm thinking. Do I do Star Wars Episode 3, which is based on my favorite Star Wars movie, which has a fun co-op mode, but also like a fun story mode? Or maybe do I gravitate towards Battlefront 2 in this case, where it's endlessly replayable. It also has those elements of Revenge of the Sith, where you're able to play as those characters, and it would also allow me to get my Star Wars fix, because, you know, I'm that type of guy where I just, you know, I need my Star Wars fix from time to time, even if it's just hearing the Empire music, even if it's just hearing the you know, just hearing the music. It's just, Star Wars has always been a part of my life, so man, you know what, I think, okay, RE4, Crash Twinsanity, Lego Batman, The Godfather, we are missing a bit of that arena shooter, infinitely replayable, because on 360 we sort of had that with Reach or BO2, so you know what, I think I'm gonna go Star Wars Battlefront 2. And now we get to Nintendo, and this is where I just have to give up. Okay, so we have, I mean, do we include handhelds in this? Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, then you have the NES, SNES, N64, the GameCube, the Wii, the Wii U, and the Nintendo Switch. So here's what I'm thinking. I think for all intents and purposes, if I'm going off of what I would want to choose, I honestly would choose the Super Nintendo, but at the same time with the Switch, there is so many games available on there that were available on previous platforms. You have games that were available on Wii, NES, SNES, Switch, N64, and then games that were just released for Nintendo Switch itself, as well as GameCube, that are just natively available on the Nintendo Switch now as Nintendo Switch releases. But there is also a lot of games on there that are just kind of locked behind, you know, Nintendo Switch Online, which we can't really count because there wouldn't be online on this island. So I kind of want to go with Switch because the Wii U is like one of my favorite Nintendo consoles of all time. But obviously a lot of those games are available on Switch. So if I would go with Switch, it'd be easy. I'd be like, yeah, you know, put like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on there. And then put like Metroid Prime Remastered on there. And this, that, or the other. And like, but man, I don't know. When I'm thinking Nintendo and I'm thinking of like the one console that I would want on that desert island, as much as I love the Wii U, the GameCube, the Nintendo Switch, the NES, the N64, all these other consoles that I have nostalgia for, the first vivid memory from my life, stop me if you've heard this before, it's a broken record thing, and I know I repeat myself all the time, but I just say this in case there's new viewers watching. The first vivid memory from my life is playing Donkey Kong Country on the SNES when I was 3 years old. It was late in the evening. I was playing that temple level where you and Diddy Kong have to jump on the tires and jump on the snakes and all of that. You already know what I'm talking about. You know, there's all the barrels all over the place. And, yeah, I don't know. Not just because, again, not only is it the first vivid memory from my life, but it's obviously not only the first vivid memory from my life, but also the first video game memory from my life. And by proxy, the first video game memory from my life is also my first vivid memory from my life. So it's even more special for that because at my core, I'm a gamer, okay? Like, I live, breathe, exist, like, video games are literally everything to me. So the fact that my first memory is there with DKC on the SNES, and furthermore, just all of the amazing games that are available on the Super Nintendo, like, out of all the Nintendo consoles, honestly, one of the ones that I play the most nowadays is the Super Nintendo. In fact, in the last month, out of all the Nintendo consoles that I've ended up playing the most have actually been, like, the Super Nintendo. Like, I've just been playing a lot of Super Nintendo games. And this is where things get even trickier, because as much as I want to put Final Fantasy 3, which is actually Final Fantasy 6 on here, because that's, you know, one of my, it's so much nostalgia there, one of the first RPGs that I played. It's hard because it's an RPG, and with RPGs, even though you could kind of like endlessly grind for a bit, there is still an ending to it, and it's one of those things where, like, you know, it's an RPG, it's story-based, you roll through the credits, and while you could keep playing it, I think I might try to stick to some games that are just more, I guess, like, endlessly replayable in a way. So first things first, we're gonna just straight up, we're gonna go with it. We're gonna go Super Nintendo. And then we're going to go Donkey Kong Country, definitely Donkey Kong Country. I'm also going to go Super Mario World. It's funny how easily everything for the SNES is coming to me. And then that's where things get a little tricky. Okay, so we have Donkey Kong Country, we have Super Mario World. I really want to put a RPG on here. I'm debating between Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy 3. This is so difficult. Okay, yeah, so I've made up my mind. We're definitely going to put an RPG on here. And between the two of them, Final Fantasy 3 and Chrono Trigger, the first one that I played was Final Fantasy 3. So I think we're going to go with Final Fantasy 3. That hurts. I love Chrono Trigger to death. But I also have to account for the nostalgia factor of between the two of those games, I played Final Fantasy 3 before I got to play Chrono Trigger. So Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario World, Final Fantasy 3. Where in God's name do we go from here? There's a part of me that kind of wants to swap out Super Mario World for Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World because that is technically just one cartridge. Would you guys be mad at me if I did that? I know it's technically more than one game, but it is a single Super Nintendo cartridge, and we didn't make any rules about that, and it is technically a part of the Super Nintendo library. Even though it's a remake specifically made for Super Nintendo, so it's kind of the same concept. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do Super Mario. That feels dirty. Doesn't it feel dirty? Fine, I'll just stay with Super Mario World, because I know somebody would probably say that's cheating. I really wanted to, but we'll just stick with Super Mario World. I actually feel like my brain's gonna explode right now. I can't. Two more games. See, there's so many amazing games that, like, there's okay, I'm gonna be real with y'all. I have like 30 games that I want to say right now, and I'm trying to pick two of them. Contra is another one that's coming to my mind because obviously, okay, so we have DKC, that's a platformer, Super Mario World, that's a platformer. I know we have two platformers, but you need Donkey Kong and you need Super Mario if you're gonna be on the SNES. We have Final Fantasy 3, which covers more RPG bases. I want to put Contra 3 on here. Contra 3: The Alien Wars. I mean, that's it's sort of like what we did for the other consoles, where you have like a shooter on there. And I mean, Contra 3 is one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. That game is absolutely legendary. So There's that. I'm also leaning towards Star Fox. I really love Star Fox on the Super Nintendo. Man, this is so difficult. I also just remembered that we have Doom on the Super Nintendo, so okay, you know what? We're gonna put Doom. We're doing Doom. We're doing Doom. Which then means, okay, so we have Doom. We have Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario World, Final Fantasy 3, Doom. And then that leaves me, okay, so we could either do Contra, but we already have a shooter now with Doom, and we also have 2D platformers with the other two. I think I gotta go with Star Fox. Even though it's technically a shooter, it's still like a 3D type of like flying shooter game. I also really wanted to put Super Mario Kart on here, but I don't know. I mean, we technically already have a Mario game with Super Mario World. I know it's completely different because Super Mario Kart is a racing game, so, you know, I really want to put that on here, but I don't know, man. I'm thinking about this desert island experience. I already have one Mario game. If I want another game that's different but still vehicle based, but then there's F-Zero. Oh my gosh, F-Zero. F-Zero or Star Fox. F-Zero or Star. Oh my, I can't do this. I'm gonna keep it real. This is one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made in my life. Between F-Zero and Star Fox, this is hard. We technically already have a shooter with Doom, but between F-Zero and Star Fox, if I'm alone on this desert island, as fun as... I'm trying to think. Okay, so... I can't do this, man! F-Zero and Star Fox. F-Zero and Star Fox. Now that I'm thinking of it, I also really want to put a Kirby game on here, but we already have 2D platformers with the other two, so I'm just gonna restrain myself to these two again. Okay, so racing in Star Fox would be a lot of, but then there's Star Fox as well. We technically already have a shooter, which makes me want to go, you know, F-Zero, just because, you know, it's F-Zero. It's just, it's a fun racing game. It's a fun time, but then Star Fox is also a really fun time, and it's like crazy with its 3D graphics. But then we also already have like a 3D graphics type game with Doom, but okay, I'm just F-Zero, you know, going around Circuit City, and then I'm gonna go with Star Fox. That was not an easy decision to make. Okay, we're just gonna leave it there. Okay, now I need to choose. Okay, so on the desert island, I have, if I'm allowed to take one of each console, the Xbox 360 with Black Ops 2, Halo Reach, GTA 5, Minecraft, and Plants vs. Zombies. PlayStation, I'd be taking the PlayStation 2 with Resident Evil 4, Crash Twinsanity, Lego Batman, The Godfather, and Star Wars Battlefront 2. For Nintendo, I'd be taking the Super Nintendo, Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario World, Final Fantasy 3, Doom, and Star Fox. Now the real question is, if I had to choose between one of these consoles, I'm going to narrow it down to the PlayStation and Xbox 360. As much as I love the Super Nintendo, if I was stuck on a desert island, I already know in my heart I'd go between one of those two. And this is where things get really difficult. If I take the Xbox 360, I have the endless replayability of the Black Ops 2 multiplayer and zombies. Sure, there wouldn't be any online, so I'd just be playing against bots for the multiplayer side of BO2, but there's that. The endless replayability of GTA 5, Halo Reach, Minecraft, and PvZ, all endlessly replayable games, some of them also having in-depth story modes if I need that story fixed. But then there's the PlayStation 2, which is like, you know, my endless, it's just, it doesn't matter how much time passes, no matter what point I'm at in my life, it's my safe space, it's my console where, you know, I turn it on and I just feel safe. I feel like I'm being transported to another dimension where nothing else matters and I can just be free to exist without having to worry, you know what I mean? Just, everything just, it's lifted off my chest. I get those same feelings from the 360, but I feel like it's just because I was there for the entire PS2 generation. To where, you know, there's just that level of, I guess, early childhood innocence to it, just because that's like one of the, basically my first console generation that I was actually there and lived through. So, you know, it's, and then again, we got RE4, my favorite game of all time, and even though it's story-based, endlessly replayable, Crash Twinsanity, same thing, Lego Batman, you know, same thing there, The Godfather, same thing there, and Star Wars Battlefront 2, same thing there, so it's really tough. There's a part of me that feels like Desert Island-wise, I might get more longevity out of the 360 lineup, and as much as I want to take that one, like, Oh man, this is really tough because you got games like Minecraft on there too, which are great, but between the PS2 though and the 360, which one am I taking? PS2, RE4, Crash Insanity, Lego Batman, The Godfather, Star Wars Battlefront 2. See, I don't know. I've made my decision and I did not make it easily. So if I was on the desert island, as much as my nostalgia strings are calling to me to pick the PS2 because I want to pick the PS, I just want to say the words, I would take the PlayStation 2. I want to say those words. Longevity-wise, and this is the only reason, I'm setting aside nostalgia bias just to think as objectively as possible. The Xbox 360 lineup would give me more endless replayability. The PS2, the games I chose would give me a lot of replayability, but the games on 360 specifically are built around being endlessly replayable and have systems in place in those games to make them endlessly replayable. Minecraft, Plants vs. Zombies, GTA 5, Black Ops 2, Halo Reach. There is an endless amount of replayability there, and I think I'm gonna go with the Xbox 360, and I think I'm also gonna make a last-minute edit that I need to make in my heart as much as I love Halo Reach. I already have a first-person shooter with BO2, so for variety's sake, I'm gonna swap that out with LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. And the console I'm going to take on my desert island is going to be the Xbox 360 with a copy of Black Ops 2, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, Grand Theft Auto 5, Minecraft, and Plants vs. Zombies. It is also worth noting that the physical version of Plants vs. Zombies comes with a copy of Peggle and Zima included in every single version of Plants vs. Zombies. I can't help it. But hey, you know what? If you don't want to count that, if you think that's cheating, then fine. We'll just go Plants vs. Zombies. That's the only game I'll allow myself to play then on that desert island. But still, regardless, yeah, I mean, hey, you know, that's a thing. But also, the reason I went with 360, let's say sometime in the future, I'm not counting this towards the list, but there's a version of Lego Batman, Resident Evil 4, and the Godfather available on Xbox 360, and the Xbox 360 is backwards compatible to where I could play Crash Twinsanity and Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the 360 since those games were released for original Xbox. Obviously, I'm not including those games on my list because I just listed the 5 that I would take if I had to choose from the 360 lineup. But if I could somehow get some random, you know, like airdropped package from the sky, from, you know, just somehow, like a Black Ops 2 care package from some random force of nature that included those games, theoretically, I could also just play those games on the 360 if that would ever happen. Would it happen in this theoretical sense? No. But even then, if I could only have those 5 games until the end of time, just longevity and replayability-wise, setting nostalgia aside, it really hurts to say this because, you know, I love my PS2, but yeah, I'd go with the 360 and I'd go with that lineup of games. And hey, I love the 360 as well. Like, when it comes to nostalgia for consoles, it's like the PS2 and the SNES, and then it would probably go like PS2 and then SNES or 360. That's how it goes. PS2 and then 360 or SNES, depending on the day. I'd probably objectively have to say SNES since it's my first childhood memory, like my first vivid memory from my life, but like 360, SNES, it's like right there. So, you know, I love the 360 to death, so it's not like it hurts me to say 360. It's just that it hurts me because I feel like I'm dissing my PS2, but again, we have to go longevity and replayability wise, I suppose. So if we're going just off of those metrics, that's the console I'd pick if I had to choose just one, and those are the 5 games I'd pick if I had to choose just 5. But anyway, that's where we'll leave it. I know this video was really long and dragged out as is, but that's just, I mean, I can't help it. This was a very hard task for me to tackle, obviously. So, hey, if you want to let me know your desert island console and games, or, you know, if you want to do what I did before, where it's like one console from each of the, like, console manufacturers, like one for Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, and games for that, you can do that. Or if you just have to pick, like, just one console and 5 games, you can do that as well. Just whichever one you feel like doing, go ahead and let me know, because I'd love to hear your guys' answers. But anyway, as always, massive shout out, thank you to all the patrons and channel members. Thank you to all you in the low baller tier, and an even bigger shout out, thank you to all you in the mid baller tier, last team, dad, man, and the shit done on DT, run, Vince, and Cheese Gold. Thank you guys so much. You guys are literal legends. I love you. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.